Hey everybody, welcome to Leon's Chainsaw Parts and Repair. Good evening. Tonight we are looking at a carburetor off of Jeff's Homelite blower. I should remember the model, but I don't. I think it's an HB180 or something, one of those handheld blowers like that. So he could get it to run, but it would die out pretty quickly. And so I thought we'd go through this together. I started taking it apart. I think I already know what's wrong with it, but I want to show you guys the way I approach this. So ignore the fact that I've already got this side loose. Normally on these Walbro carbs, or just about any of them, this is a HB25150V. It's got the primer set up. I start on the fuel inlet side. That's where I like to look first. I don't know why. Maybe it's because usually on a Walbro, only one screw. It's easier to get to. But it's where I like to look and see what's going on. And the first thing that I noticed immediately as I popped this off is there's no filter on the inlet here. The diaphragm's still perfectly pliable. You see, let me get a tool here to show you guys. See, the diaphragm's still perfectly pliable. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Nothing at all. But there should be a filter screen down here at the inlet, and there is not. So I will add that from the kit that Jeff sent. Now this is interesting. There's actually something down in there. Some sort of something sticking out of this screen, and I don't know. There we go. I don't think it's going to focus, but you see that little fiber? That was actually down in the fuel inlet there. Looks like some 1 pound mono for tying a leader on fly line. Or tippet, I should say. That would be odd. Anyway, this side doesn't look bad. This side, however, when you get these screws out, the primer base is meant to come off, and we're not going to mess with the primer bulb because it looks like that's brand new. I think Jeff's already replaced that. But we get down to here, and I can immediately see what I don't like. There's ridges holding in here. This is pretty damn stiff. Now, you can see it still moves, but that's not pliable like this is. This is stiff. This has been exposed to ethanol fuel, I will guarantee it, and it's dried up and caused that diaphragm to be next to useless. So let's go ahead. I'll try not to make a mess out of this. Hopefully it'll come off in one piece, but it's really adhered to that. There we go. Really adhered to that gasket. Okay. So again, this isn't the worst one I've ever seen by any stretch, but it should be much, much more pliable. Could the trimmer have been made to run, or the blower made to run with that? Maybe. I know Jeff spent a lot of time with it, so I'm leaning towards no. It just wasn't going to let enough fuel through with where the inlet lever is set, the height that it's set to. This is a very generic kit. It's got a lot of different stuff in here, but here's the new diaphragm. See, that is just pliable. It'll move all over the place, move up and down easy, whereas this guy does not. So, looking at the rest of this stuff, that's the fuel passage right there. Excuse me. That's the inlet. I call this stuff that's the inlet to the mixture needles. The fuel inlet, where this screen would be, comes through right at the needle right here. We'll try depressing this. That needle moves freely. This seems to be adjusted about where these things like to live. So I'm going to say that just putting a new diaphragm in here is what this is going to need. I'll replace this gasket too, just on principle there. But I think I'm going to put this thing together with that, and we'll do a vacuum test, pressure test on the carb. Yeah, that's clean. Didn't even leave any gobbledygook behind to speak of. So let me fish out the proper gasket here. It's amazing, one season sitting with, that is not the proper gasket. I was hoping to avoid dumping all this, but no, where's that? Shoot. There's the proper gasket. So this kit covers a good number of the WT series carbs. And a good many of these don't apply to this thing at all. Just in case Jeff has any trouble down the road, there's no sense in getting rid of, like, some of the hard parts. I'll leave them in there for him. So, again, you clean up any old gasket material you've got. Make sure you set the new one in place so that it lines up on the pins properly. We can see that hole right there lines up nicely. We'll set the diaphragm in place. And make sure you get this clocked in the right direction. I should have paid more attention, but it's easy to line up the passage there with the passage up top. So there we go. Now these you don't want to over tighten and break, but at the same time you don't want to under tighten them and have a leak. So I start by getting everything just a smidge tight, and then come back for the final torque once I'm certain everything's laid down properly. Especially on these ones that have index pins, you don't want to accidentally damage your new gaskets or the casting on the carburetor, because then you get to buy a new one. And anybody who's looked for some of these old things knows that it's not as easy as just going out there and buying it. A lot of this stuff's been discontinued. So then you're stuck taking somebody else's used carburetor, if you can find one of those, and making it go. Alright. That sounds pretty good. And I'm going to stick with this. I can see the residue of the old fuel here. It doesn't smell bad. That's good. Get this back on. We'll get the pressure tester out, and we'll see if this thing holds. If it does, I'm going to get a fuel filter and some hose together so that he can replace that all at once. Those are going to go in the proper receptacle over there. I think Jeff will have a blower again. So it's easy to be intimidated by these carburetors, and anybody who's thinking of tackling one, I encourage you to go ahead and do it, but just be careful. And I like to do one side at a time if I'm not familiar with the carburetor. Now this was easy where we were using this side, but what I would have done if I needed to replace it is I would have taken these gaskets, noted which way they went, pulled out the right ones from that bag, reassembled this one, then come back over here. And now you guys know what I didn't do is put that damn screen in that I was babbling about. So I'm going to have to pull that off again and do that. But I can at least do this pressure test and know if we're barking up the wrong tree or not. That is the wrong piece of hose. Got little hose adapters that were made up. Some of them I haven't used since I changed out the hose on the pump here. That one's still set up for the old bigger hose that Homelite shipped it with. And man, that got stiff as a board. Alright, so let's hope for the best here. Aha. She is leaking. Leaking at a pretty fast clip. Way faster than I consider to be allowable. So the question is where? That is tight. I don't dare make that any tighter. Yeah, that leak down is way too fast. So I'm going to end the video. There's no reason to make this any longer than it already is. It's already too long. But what I'm going to do is pressurize this and do the old bucket of water trick. Find out where it's leaking at. If bubbles come out from around one of these gaskets, I'll know that's the culprit. And if it's on this side, I'll replace it with one of the new ones. If it's on this side, well, that's great. Awesome, another leaky gasket. I have to use some gasket sealer. But if I see bubbles coming out of the throat down in the carburetor, that means it's leaking past that needle. And I'll go ahead and change that out. So, okay, got her back together. Minor, and I'm talking minor movement of that needle. Very minor. That little bit of leak down there I can pretty much live with. And it'll get better when there's actually some fuel in there to lubricate that new needle. That ended up being it. I don't know that you guys are going to be able to see this. I will try to get focused in. Damn. Looking at this thing upside down doesn't help much either. I guess I'm not going to focus. If it is focusing by accident, this tip is rougher than a cob. That rubber is all distorted and out of shape. So that's why it was leaking. So replace that. Actually, that's going to go in the garbage. And put the filter in. I am now confident there was no leaks around this. The bubbles, when I immersed this in water under pressure, were coming right out of the throat. So I am fully satisfied that this carburetor is functioning as it should. So Jeff, I'll get some hose cut, get a filter put together for you, a little kit there, and this thing will be on its way back to you very soon.